A lot of people asking the question, what's going on? Kids killing kids. Is this a new trend or more of what was going on before the pandemic? We asked police in Winston-Salem, Greensboro, and Burlington, what's going on? Police in Winston-Salem and Greensboro say that the public perception of what's happening doesn't match what they're seeing in the community.
It's not really anything new that the gang unit or the Winston-Salem Police Department is seeing. It's just getting a lot more attention right now.
Right now, people are attributing it to gangs because that's an easy way and it's a popular way to come up with a conclusion.
And you don't see an uptick in gang-related crime?
I honestly can't say that there's an uptick. I can just say that there's an uptick in crime in general.
Of the 3 police departments we contacted, only Burlington Police reported an increase in juvenile gang-related crime. But the department did not respond to our request for an interview on gangs. Statewide, gang membership is up. The latest report from the North Carolina Department of Public Safety identifies more than 9,000 validated gang members, a 25% increase from 2 years ago. Most of the known gang members are age 15 or younger, as illustrated by the blue section of this pie chart.
We've got 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds that are getting involved in gang activity, that are involving themselves in pretty significant crimes.
I mean, that's unbelievably young.
It's younger than we've normally seen in the past.
While Winston-Salem police don't see a surge in gang-related crime, the department's gang unit sergeant says the city has seen a growing number of neighborhood gangs, also known as hybrids. Sergeant Tyler Wally says unlike bigger, nationally known gangs that are usually all black, all white, or all Hispanic, or all Asian, the hybrids are mixed gangs.
They don't care about color of skin, they care about the color of money. They care about the color green, and that's the one that they're always concerned about.
Law enforcement shares gang intelligence through a website known as GangNet. The information collected names Forsyth, Guilford, and Alamance counties as hotspots for gang activity.
It kind of went to next to nothing when the pandemic happened.
The head of the Juvenile Justice Institute at North Carolina Central University says what we're seeing right now is gang activity emerging from the pandemic.
I think what we're seeing now is a regression to pre-pandemic levels.
Jonathan Glenn says the same gang problems that existed before the pandemic are still here, namely access to wealth and education. He says gangs continue to compete for the most lucrative street corners in order to sell drugs, and how the youngest gang members are often on the front line.
And kids don't have the same kind of criminal liability that adults have. Your adult gang members are leveraging your children to carry out some of the business of the gang.
The juvenile crime expert says social media is not helping this. He says that gangs are using it as a tool for their own benefit, often turning small, minor conflicts into violent attacks. Bill O'Neill, WXII 12 News. Greensboro police say what they have seen is an increase in crime involving young suspects as well as young victims.
Give her Metro 911.
Somebody just got shot on South Elm, Eugene.
I just saw a shooting off of Florida Street at Gillespie Golf Course.
There's a young man, he's been shot. I'm on the corner of Florida and Randolph Avenue. I heard a pop, 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 pop.
2 of the city's latest victims were Dudley High School students. Basil Wilson, age 14, and Trevion Hairston, age 17. Both were gunned down on city streets less than 2 weeks apart. So far, police have not linked either shooting to any gang.
We certainly are doing our research on the case itself, as well as any affiliations that Basil had. But we certainly can't say that at this point.
A week after this news conference, we asked Deputy Chief Michael Terry for any information he could share on Greensboro gangs. How many gang members do you think are validated or you've been able to identify here in Greensboro?
I thought about that prior to the interview, and I honestly couldn't give you a reasonable estimate, and that's just being honest with you. It's very difficult to identify a person that's actually in the gang and trying to validate or prove that.
When we asked Winston-Salem police the same question, a spokesman for the department's gang unit told us they had validated 600 gang members in the city and roughly 300 active gangs.
How many gangs do you think are in Greensboro?
It's very difficult to say. I'll just tell you that it's not a large population, from my opinion.
Greensboro began a gang unit back in 2007 that came under some criticism from leaders in the black community. Today, that gang unit no longer exists. Deputy Chief Terry says that a recent forum on gangs offered up a warning to police.
They told us to be careful about overclassifying things as being related to gang activity. I certainly will tell you that we have it here. There's no doubt about it.
Law enforcement shares gang intelligence online through a website called GangNet. That information generates an annual statewide report on gangs, which shows that most gang members in North Carolina are African American. But the most recent report includes a warning about GangNet. Quote, a knowledge gap exists among trained law enforcement officers in North Carolina at detecting and validating gang members among lesser-known affiliations. Therefore, traditional white and Asian gangs may go undetected and underrepresented in the GangNet system.
Our concern is the crimes that are being committed, whether it's a gang committing them or whether it's a person that's not related to a gang.
One interesting note about GangNet, law enforcement agencies are not required to enter any information. And according to the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, they put out a warning that says, quote, GangNet falls short in meaningful data interpretation. Bill O'Neill, WXII 12 News. Kids as young as 10 or 11 years of age are joining gangs in Winston-Salem. The head of the city's gang unit says the youth movement is more prevalent now than ever before.
Winston-Salem police say neighborhood gangs with names like the Money Train Gang are the fastest growing in the city.
And they're the ones that are having the most infighting. They're the ones that are having the most issues with other rival sets here in Winston-Salem.
Authorities have not publicly blamed any gang for the shooting death of William Miller. But Forsyth County District Attorney Jim O'Neill raised the subject in a news conference held the day after the Mount Tabor incident.
When gangs can very easily persuade a child in 6th and 7th grade to come follow their lead.
Make a hole!
Mount Tabor's students and their parents had linked the shooting to gang activity privately, but O'Neill was the first person to speak publicly about gangs.
And if a child enters a gang in 6th or 7th grade, we've lost them, folks. We've lost them.
The head of the city's gang unit, Sergeant Tyler Wally, says Winston-Salem has roughly 30 gangs, and police know who the gang members are.
We have roughly probably about 600 gang members that are validated and have gone through that full process. And we have intelligence files on them.
The gang unit sergeant says local rappers performing on YouTube are glorifying gang life, helping to entice young kids to join neighborhood gangs.
These kids are watching it and they're thinking that it is cool, and so they're getting involved in it.
Do you see a more aggressiveness out of the gangs?
Recently, I do think we've seen a little bit more aggression, a little bit more bold acts of crime, specifically with regard to drive-by shootings.
Sergeant Wally says he's worked the gang unit for a decade, and his goal is to know gang members better than they know themselves.
What has experience taught you?
Experience has taught me is that you cannot arrest your way out of a gang problem or a gang presence in your jurisdiction. You have to collaborate with citizens.
Winston-Salem currently has 8 officers working in the gang unit. It is the only department in the triad with a gang unit. Bill O'Neill, WXII 12 News. Is the answer more carrot or more stick? Enticement versus punishment? This juvenile crime expert says the answer is clear, and at least some members of the local law enforcement community agree with them.
The Associate Director of the Juvenile Justice Institute at North Carolina Central University says the research clearly shows that prevention is the best way to steer young members of a community away from trouble.
That we can't arrest our way out of problems. We can't arrest our way out of social issues, that there are some things that we're going to have to put our socio-political differences aside.
We hear the same message from a gang unit sergeant in Winston-Salem.
Experience has taught me is that you cannot arrest your way out of a gang problem or a gang presence in your jurisdiction.
The community's still waiting to find out if the fatal shooting of a high school student at Mount Tabor in Winston-Salem is gang-related, or whether the recent shooting deaths of 2 Dudley High School students in Greensboro is linked to gang activity. But whether it's gang-related or not, Jonathan Glenn offers up this suggestion.
We have to start seeing these youth who may be involved in some gang behavior as children, as youth, as members of our community, and we need to engage them as such.
And sooner rather than later, says Winston-Salem Gang Unit Sergeant Tyler Wally. He says the city is seeing gangs recruit kids as young as 10 and 11 years old.
If you wait too long and they get embroiled in that gang life, just arresting them, it's not gonna solve any problems whatsoever.
Whether it's identifying at-risk youth or early prevention programs, Jonathan Glenn says it's better to spend money now before it's too late.
There's money that's going to flow, as a result of these issues. I think they should flow on the front end of this continuum, not necessarily on the policing and enforcement end.
Jonathan Glenn says that the community can see a troubled kid as someone in need of help instead of someone who is a common street thug. The outcome will be much better. Bill O'Neill, WXII 12 News.